everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. I'm Edward, I guess otherwise known as the Lightkeeper, on this wonderful, fine internet forum. Or podcast, I guess it's really not a forum in that regard. Anyway, I hope everyone is having a great spring and that May is off to a fabulous start. It is still a bit chilly in my neck of the woods. It has warmed up for a few days. It still hasn't hit the magical 80-degree mark, but it's been close. And if it wasn't for one of the Great Lakes being very, very close, it would have by now. But the lake is still extremely cold. No ice, but very cold, which keeps temperatures kind of chilly. It's a bummer this time of year, but the payback is in the fall when the lake has warmed up. And in the fall, when things start to get chilly, the lake actually keeps things a little bit warmer. So it's, I guess, six of one, half dozen of another. So today I was thinking about something that comes up, and you actually see it a lot. And it's probably one of the more asked questions that I get that rolls in. And the question is, how do I know if somebody is kinky in the lifestyle? Or the kind of related question to it is, boy, I really, really love my boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, wife, husband, but how do I find out if they're kinky? Or can I make them kinky? That's also the other one that comes in. How do I make my person submissive? How do I make my person dominant? How do I make my person a switch? Or simply, how do I get them to try something out of the normal in the bedroom? And there isn't, like, I do not believe there is a way to make somebody a dominant, make somebody a submissive or switch or any other role within the lifestyle. I don't think you can make somebody. I believe you can teach somebody how to play that role, especially during playtime. You can, play that role. I'm not like the saying goes, I'm not a doctor, but I played one on TV. Okay, so you're not necessarily a dominant, but you can teach somebody how to play the dominant role, perhaps in the bedroom or whatever room in the house you get your kink on, or wherever you get your kink on. It doesn't have to be within the four walls, the friendly confines of your house. But that's a big thing. How do we find out if somebody is into the lifestyle? And this might sound hokey, and I wish I had one of those late night TV voices so I could do, has this happened to you? You're shopping for your groceries and you're waiting to check out, and you have a random conversation with a attractive stranger, and you hit it off while you're waiting to scan your groceries and escape, and you exchange means to contact, and you spend a little time together. You have some maybe text conversations, and they're wonderful, and you think this is a fabulous new friend, and suddenly that new friend is somebody that you're interested in, but you're also involved in the lifestyle, or perhaps you're not in the lifestyle, but you're poly. And jeepers, that's not always an easy question that you can bring up and ask. Hey, how do you feel about whips, chains, and a little DS? Or how do you feel about ethically loving more than one person? Now, the ethically loving more than one person is probably a little simpler to ask, because there are perhaps less taboos on that one. Although either way, or even a combination of both of them, it's not a easy question to ask somebody that is a relative stranger, or even a friend of yours. And this is where kink dating gets a little challenging, because we all have vanilla friends, and vanilla friends have a friend who has a friend that they think would be perfect for us. Sometimes we take on one of those perhaps blind or semi-blind dates. I guess would that be a legally blind date if you have some contact with the person rather than just meeting for coffee and you've never seen them? Is that a legally blind date? You have a little vision of the other person, but anyways, sorry about that shiny thing moment. It happens. So you have this person that your friends think is great, and perhaps you even meet them and you think they're great. Obviously, you keep your kinky side or your poly side, hidden, and you're the most charming, you're a charming vanilla person that you actually are. And so how do you find out if they are, perhaps kinky, or if they're in the lifestyle, or they're curious about it? They have an open mind. And so that's kind of it's a tricky situation. So the best thing to do, I mean, if you are, and I'll use myself as the example here. I know I would not be happy if I chose to enter a relationship where somebody was not involved in the lifestyle. Now, I don't have certain criteria or certain expectations that they must be X, Y, and Z or into LMNOP, any of that sort of thing, other than, yes, I'm a dominant, and so the other person's obviously other side of the slash with me needs to be on the submissive side. Doesn't mean they can't be a switch, but with the dynamic there, it would need to be, on the submissive side to my dominant. So I know that's a must have. So obviously it makes, that random checkout conversation encounter that leads to more conversations to decide whether they're, even if they're an amazing person, that there has to be this extra layer there to pursue more than just friendship. So how do you do that? And I spent a lot of time thinking about it and things that I have done in the past kind of to ascertain things without hopefully appearing like a creepet or some sort of pervert. I mean, I guess I am a pervert. I'll take that badge and wear it and own it. But you don't want to walk around town with an "I love BDSM" T-shirt on. At least not in my town. That would probably not be the wisest thing in conservative land. But so how do you kind of feel this out? Um, I'm not a fan of having the conversation roll into sex and pushing that into the kinkalicious side of sex. Sex sort of comes up on its own in conversations when you're interested with somebody, and it's a natural, for me it's always been a natural occurrence when that happens. I don't go pushing it, looking for it, any of those types of things. I just wait for it to percolate up, and it will, provided there's an attraction. It's human nature. We're what's the song, we're nothing but animals, and so it will come up. But rather than having it come up and then trying to steer that conversation into all things kinky coitus related, um, there are ways that you can subtly go and start a conversation without perhaps outing yourself, because perhaps that person that you've met is a friend of a friend of a friend, and in that group of friends they don't know your lifestyle side. Or even if it's just in the area, say, for example, where I live, where it's a small enough town where odds are that person you've just met knows somebody who knows somebody who knows your family. It's small town way of life. No matter where you are in the world, I imagine small towns are like that. So you have to be careful about how you do this if you want to keep the autonomy, if you want to keep who knows about your lifestyle up to you. So there's a couple of different things that I have found successful. First is to share and this is after you get to know somebody. This is not like right out of the bat. This is after you've gotten to know somebody and you're interested in them, you feel that they're interested in you, and it's you know that for that interest to possibly go anywhere, you need to know that they are in the lifestyle. Or you can even do this if you have a partner and you are curious about exploring the lifestyle and you would like your partner to explore it with you. So, the easiest way that I've found is to share an article about the lifestyle, preferably one that doesn't necessarily have four letters in it. And those four letters that I look to avoid is BDSM. And it seems probably maybe unusual that I would look for an article on the lifestyle. Like DS is fine, kinky, fabulous, but BDSM has so many negative connotations and bad stereotypes, bad juju, and it sounds taboo, and perhaps that somebody, is not educated about it, so they still think of it as it was, 15 years ago, a mental illness. So you definitely want to, in my opinion, share an article that talks about the lifestyle in a positive way. For example, an article that talks about how BDSM and mental health are not actually people who are involved in the lifestyle are not mentally unhealthy. And in fact, research is showing that they perhaps are more healthy mentally than some of their vanilla peers, which can be a great thing because it's easier now to have a conversation about mental health or something could have happened in the world that that brought mental health up and hey, I was just looking into this because this happened and I found this article. What do I'd love to hear what you think on it. Um, or another way is to watch a kind of a kink related movie together and then talk about the movie. Perhaps 50 Shades isn't the best movies to go with, but I I love the movie The Secretary. I know it's not an accurate portrayal of the lifestyle, but it does portray the lifestyle. And I am of an age where James Spader was one of those movie stars, I guess, if you could call James Spader a movie star, perhaps a star that appeared in a lot of movies from my youth. So, or that were out or that were popular when I was a youth. So that's kind of a nice way to, hey, it's a James Spader movie. Have you ever seen this one? It's not, well, I can't remember. Was it 16 Candles that James Spader was, or was it Pretty in Pink? That he was one of the John Hughes, maybe more. Um, somebody will correct me on the proper Spader in John Hughes movies. I am certain of that. But it's a great way to kind of break the ice and allows the lifestyle to become a conversation point. But before you bring it up, perhaps you have picked your movie or you found the article, but before you bring it up to the other person, you do need to kind of prepare for the conversation on your end, rather than just curiosity on how they're going to respond. You need to prepare for your side of it because you need to understand your feelings and your desires. And what I mean by that is know what you want. Know what you want from this other person. Do you want to just be friends that is open and you can be open and share your kinky side with this person as a friend? There's nothing's reserved or nothing is held back with this person. Are you interested in more than friendship with this person? But in order to have that more than friendship, you need to have the kinky spark be there as well. Or perhaps you are talking to an existing partner and you're wanting to get their thoughts and their feelings on the lifestyle. So you kind of need to prepare for your end of the conversation. And on top of that, you need to. be able to create a safe and comfortable place to have the conversation. For example, watching a movie together, say it is The Secretary, and you finish watching the movie and you say, "Hey, let's go split some dessert at a little coffee shop or a little pub perhaps." But that might not be the best place to bring up the movie and the lifestyle, maybe just a couple general things because you're talking about a movie that but a public setting like that could make the person that you're wanting to get to open up uncomfortable because it's a public setting. And let's face it, these questions that we have and things that we're curious about with this other person are not necessarily things that everyone would be comfortable discussing in a public environment. So we need to make sure that when we bring this up, we do so in a safe environment where it's safe for them to feel that they can open up, and it's an environment that makes them feel comfortable to do so. And it's also important that we have our boundaries set up, meaning, for example, if I'm talking to this person about this, am I comfortable telling them, yes, I'm involved in TS. I am a dominant. In fact, I have a blog, a podcast, and I do this thing called the Daily DS every day on Instagram, which is now morphed into a daily vlog Monday through Friday. And for me, I mean, that's a lot of, I mean, imagine how overwhelming that would be to somebody who is potentially just curious about the lifestyle. And here I am saying, hey, I blog, I do this podcast, and then I do this video blog, which is on Spotify, where you can see my face, and I talk about this every day. And those little daily DSs, they go on Instagram, and they go on my blog, and people can see my face. Or even then, even for the other podcasting sites, they can just listen and hear these things. I can only imagine that that would be very, very intimidating. So you want to have good boundaries of what you are willing to share about yourself, and also boundaries in place to make it feel comfortable for the person that you're wanting to talk about this to share it, because you don't want to push them in an area where you're pushing into their boundaries, or trying to push through their boundaries to get more information than they're comfortable with. So you need to be very aware of, and perhaps set boundaries on behalf of your partner in places that are very neutral and very safe, so that you don't cross and potentially get into something daring that makes your partner feel uncomfortable. And understand that even though you feel that this area is safe, pay attention to your partner, because they may not feel that what you think is safe ground might feel very shaky to them. So you have to be very careful the with boundaries and respect them. And also, it's very important to remember everyone views a lot of things in this lifestyle differently. For example, what one person calls a dominant, another person might disagree. It's very important to understand things mean different things to different people. And if we are talking to somebody that we don't know their history, we don't know their lifestyle education level, they may view some of the activities and things that we are kind of going to start probing them about very differently than we do, because we have a more educated opinion on it. We may have experienced it. We may have talked about it. This could be the first time that they're talking about being tied up, or doing tying up, or, you know, a power dynamic in a relationship. Even though really even vanilla relationships have dynamics within them, it's still that power exchange side is different than anything that they've potentially ever talked about. So we need to be very careful and considerate that that the activities that we're talking about is something that they're comfortable with by judging their reaction, and understand that what we mean and what they mean can be two very different things. So we need to be very on guard for miscommunications, not out of intention, intentionally miscommunicating, but just having different meanings assigned to the same words. And also, it should go without saying, but this is going out on the internet, so it needs to be said. Never ever pressure somebody to talk about something that they obviously feel uncomfortable about. Unless, and this isn't, for me, this isn't pressuring. If you're talking to your partner or a potential partner about it, and they blush, for example, blush and take a second, and they're like, and you can tell that obviously they're a little uncomfortable, and they express that this isn't something that's necessarily easy for them to talk about, but they would like to. But can you just, maybe go slowly? And then that's okay, because it's it's okay to go slow. In fact, going slow is the best and only way to do this is to go slow and not overdo it. And as I said before, if you can try to avoid those four letters of BDSM, perhaps use kinky rather than BDSM. I would even tend to, in conversation, shy away from DS. It's okay to put it out there here and there, but kind of kinky is a great word because it's softer. Kinky means it's easier to say that, hey, I'm into some kinky stuff, rather than it's to say and be accepted in the vanilla world than it is to say, hey, I'm into BDSM or I'm poly. And if you kind of sub kinky in there, it's kind of erotic. It might sound fun, daring, which are good things, because if this person is interested in you and you're using a word that sounds fun, daring, and erotic to them, they might be more inclined to have a conversation about it. And which is great, because that's what we need to do. And it's going to come down to starting to ask some questions, provided we have the consent. Once again, consent is key. We're not going to want to hammer away at somebody who is not consenting to this conversation. So just like you're asking for consent to be spanked, you're going to want to have consent to have these conversations, and consent helps make them feel more comfortable, because it shows that you're actually caring about their thoughts and feelings as you go into this. But when you're having this discussion and starting this discussion, questions are going to come up. You're going to ask them, they're going to ask them. Endeavor to make sure your questions are open ended. Um, it can be very easy to say, "Hey, have you ever heard of DS before?" And that's not really open ended. Um, that's yes, I know what it is. I think I know what it is. And in fact, that's such a key thing that I just said. So often when we say something like, "Oh, do you know what DS is?" and the other person says yes, it might mean something completely different to you, or between you and them. For example, if they don't understand the connotation that you're saying DS, they might be thinking that you're asking about a Nintendo DS, and perhaps you're both gamers. So maybe they think you're talking about a video game, talking about the Nintendo, rather than the dominance and submission. So you want to be open ended, because this allows for discussion. So you find out right away whether they've misunderstood your question about DS, whether they think they're going to talk to you about Donkey Kong and Mario Brothers and Mario Kart. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, this is a long way from dominance and submission. So keeping things open ended and saying, what do you know about DS? That will get them talking, which will alert you whether you're talking about Mario Kart and trying to figure out how to get a conversation from Mario Kart to dominance and submission and all things kinky, or if yes, they've heard of DS in the way that you've heard of it, And now they're going to share what they know, which is important because it's going to allow you then to say, well, are you curious about it, or have you explored it? And once again, we're being open-ended, and we're getting a conversation started. And even if you're not using DS, if you're using kinky, what kind of kinky things are of interest to you? Um, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean you're going to have the sex talk when you're saying activities. Activities sounds kind of like, it's the sex question or one of the sex questions. But remember, DS isn't necessarily a sex thing unless that's your jam. And if that's the case, go ahead, butter your bread with your jam. But it's a great way to have a discussion, and also, since most people are going to be inclined to think of it as a sex thing, perhaps because that's how the greater vanilla world typically sees things, it's a great opportunity to have that discussion and route it into oh, there's so much more. Once again, late night infomercial voice. Not only do you get kinky sex if you want it, but also um, and it's also important to just keep it open ended. What kind of boundaries do you set with yourself when you explore new things? Um, have you ever experienced, a dynamics with power in a relationship? Perhaps have you ever heard of safe, sane, and consensual? Now, safe, sane, and consensual is a great question to bring up because it has kind of crossed over into the vanilla world. I heard it on a ski lift this winter, and it was shocking, but it was a ski patroller having a conversation about staying in bounds at a ski area rather than going out of bounds and risking getting swept away in an avalanche. But it was shocking to me because all of a sudden I heard safe, sane, and consensual, and I'm like, wait a second, I just came out of a ski patroller's mouth at a ski area. This can't be going where I think it's going to go. And it certainly didn't. It was about staying in bounds. But so many of us in the kink world think, you could be a prick. You could, be into safe, sane, and consensual. You could be into the four C's. You could be into rack. But safe, sane, and consensual is an expression that's kind of crossed over and is somewhat mainstream. I mean, if I'm picking it up about avalanche safety, um, so it's a great way to probe and find out what they know, and do they know where it comes from. Um, and of course, another great question is, in the right relationship, what are some of the things you'd be interested in trying? And once again, when you say interested in trying, you can be like, yeah, I don't mean sex things. I don't, we're not talking about sex here, which is going to make somebody even have to think even harder on that. And if they are familiar with the lifestyle, a great question is, do you know that there's a whole lifestyle community? And if so, what do you think of it? Because they may have heard of it, but they may not know that there's all kinds of amazing supportive people out there, either online or in person or a combination thereof, whatever works. And that's something that you can explore together. So that's a fabulous thing. So obviously you want to have this conversation as respectfully as you can. You want to respect them. There definitely could be blushes on both sides and a little bit of embarrassment because some of these topics are not necessarily easy. And as I said, leave the sex out of it unless is the kinky sex is your jam, then by all means, make sure that's what you're buttering your bread with. And the other thing that is so important, especially, and this is a human nature issue, and it's something humans we all struggle with, especially when we are looking to ascertain information. We can become so focused on trying to ask our questions correctly and in ways that'll get a great response that we don't necessarily listen to the answer to the question. We may hear them speak, but we don't necessarily hear that answer. And that answer is so important because one answer can move a discussion down a rabbit hole for hours, and that's fabulous. And that's a huge sign of connecting with somebody when you ask a question and their answer leads to the conversation completely diving into a rabbit hole and maybe meeting Alice along the way while you're down the rabbit hole. And it's fabulous. But you need to listen. And as humans, when we're having a conversation where it's kind of scripted on our end, it can be we can struggle listening. So make sure you listen and hear your partner or potential partner when you're having these kinds of conversations, and always make sure that you are respectful. You respect their boundaries, you respect their consent, and make sure that when you're explaining this, if it gets to the point where it's like, oh yeah, and I've interested in this with kink, and they kind of throw the same question back at you, and you say, oh well, I've experienced spanking, or I've experienced bondage, or some role play, or all three of all of these things, and I really like them, and I'd like to have them be a part of my next relationship, or I would like them to be added to our relationship. It's important to, when you're sharing these thoughts, that you share with the person that you're doing them or have done them in a safe and consensual manner, because it can be very intimidating to talk about these things, especially for a vanilla person. It can be kind of hard to do so, and it helps make it less intimidating for them to be reassured that everything that you've talked about doing or wanting to do is done with safety as a priority, along with consent. And it's also important when you're talking about kink and the things within that you like, you want, or that you need, to frame not only the physical act, if you will, the physical act of spanking. When you talk about that, it's so good and helpful to talk about it in a way that is that the act is actually an expression of the trust and the communication and the feelings that are there between you and your, say, a past partner, or what you want to have be with your next partner. So when you're framing the actual physical acts, you are talking about the positive emotional aspects of the kink, of what it brings to the relationship, because that really helps kind of take some of that trepidation, intimidation away from the new or vanilla or curious person that you're talking to, away when you're talking about, say, spanking, but you're talking about how it feels emotionally rather than the physical side of it. I mean, the physical side really is just the kinky icing on the cake, is it not? So when we're talking about it, talk about the positive emotion and the positive impacts it has on the relationships. And should you find a prospective person that is open and understanding, and you like them, they like you, or you bring up diving in and exploring kink to your partner, and they are like, yeah, I'd like to explore this. I'm curious as well. So maybe, let's explore it together. Here are a few things. Be patient and be understanding. You could be in a big hurry to get to a point with a partner where, if you say you're submissive and this new person, you really like them, and it can be very easy to get impatient to want them to evolve or become your dominant, or if you're a dominant, for this person to evolve and become their submissive. It's going to take time, and it's going to take more time than you think. Guarantee you it is going to take you longer than you think. So don't put a time frame on it. Allow nature to play its course and understand that for every 2 steps forward you take, you'll take a step back, because there's going to be awkward conversations. There will be misunderstandings, and there will be miscommunications. It's going to happen. So be prepared for it. When one of these awkward moments happens, don't get flustered. It's going to happen. You're going to get through it. You have the conversation, which isn't always easy, especially when you're trying to communicate about a miscommunication, but you'll get through it and you'll keep going. But just understand that there's going to be, just like anything, ups and downs. And work on exploring kinky activities together. Whether it's reading the same book together and talking about it as you read it. If you're, for example, poly, Dostoevsky's The Ethical Slut, fabulous book to read together with a potential partner. Um, or going back if you're more on the BDSM side, the old classic of Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. But find activities that you can do together that are related to the lifestyle. So not only are you learning about each other, you're learning about the lifestyle, but you're spending time together. And so therefore the lifestyle is being something that brings you together, brings you closer. And also, something else to understand is if you are talking to somebody who is coming from the vanilla world at large, the kink world prioritizes and has such, um, such a priority on consent, safety, safe words, consent. It's so important in the kink world that even if you get somebody who is pretty vanilla and has a very highly developed, um, nose for consent. They prize consent as much as we do in the lifestyle. Odds are it's still going to be eye opening how much consent happens in the lifestyle versus in the vanilla world. Vanilla consent conversations typically are simpler because the activities are simpler. It's much easier to say, "Hey, I've had a great date. I would like to go home and take you with me and perhaps have sex." And if the other person says, "Yes, I would like that," then you have a discussion of what in the course of sex is going to be consented and not when it comes to vanilla. Where, goodness gracious, over here in the kink world, we're like, "Well, I'd like to take you home and give you a spanking on your bare bottom." But at the same time, I understand that a bare bottom spanking doesn't give me the consent to touch your private parts, even though they're right there, and you know, your bottom is bare, and there's no clothing in the way. I still need to ask for the extra consent to touch there, and then to touch here, and so it's typically uh, safe words, consent, and safety is a discussion that will be something that you need to have repeatedly with somebody who is new. And it's not because they don't want to learn or that they are some curmudgeon out there looking to take advantage. It's just, it's all new. And that is also new to them. And consent and these safety discussions are fabulous because they also help make the person more comfortable, that everything is so consent based and so driven by consent and conversation. It actually helps lessen one's fears, which is fabulous. And remember, go slow, go slow, go slower than slow. And when you go somewhere new, talk about it. Talk about how it felt, whether you would want to do it again, or if you did it again, what you'd want to try different. And when you talk about perhaps doing something again, don't talk about necessarily adding new things to it. Just trying that thing that was new again, rather than saying, okay, we did letter A for the first time. Now we're going to do A and B. Focus on just, enjoying letter A before you go on to bringing letter B into the picture. Take it slow. Take it slower than you probably would like to, because unless they're pushing for A and B, and even if they are, maybe, just do that A thing one more time. Um, and the more you can talk about it, the better it's going to be, because the more conversation, obviously, the better things work. The more you can talk about, I like this, I didn't care for that, when you did that, oh my God, when you did that, yeah, I'm sorry, that wasn't the greatest thing, but more of this other thing over here. And, in the past, I've liked this. The more you can openly talk about it, the better off things will be. And when it comes to DS2, and we can all want somebody amazing that we meet, or if we have an existing partner, we can all really want them to fit the role that fits us. If using myself again as the example, if I met somebody new that was amazing and we started having these conversations about kink, and we started having really good kink conversations, and we started exploring and talking about things together, my hope is going to be that they are on the submissive side, right? That the more that they learn, they're going to really be like, yeah, the submissive side, that's me. And that's our hopefulness thinking. The thing is, as we explore DS, we can come in, and you see this all the time. People come in and I am submissive or I am dominant. And then the more they explore it, suddenly the more their role changes. They went from submissive to switch to, a year later they're dominant. Or, it fluctuates, because as you're learning, you're growing, and as you're growing, you're changing. Once again, it's human nature. So don't go in really, 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 especially if you have a partner, don't go in trying to push them into a role. Let them let them work their way to the role that fits them, rather than you trying to kind of push them like a cookie press, to come out in the shape that you are hoping for. And also, you know, like I said, communication is so key, but make sure that you are listening when you're getting feedback from your partner, because you are going to probably be the more experienced of the two. So listen, listen, listen to their feedback before you decide or think of what's next in your journey. And also, I know this is going to kind of sound crazy, but submissives, hear me out. You may have to kind of take the role of being a dominant here. Even if you are hoping in your explorations, oh, I said exploitations, explorations, um, this person is trending dominant, shall we say, you need to realize that since you have the experience, you're going to have to kind of be the one leading for a while. Maybe prodding, like, this is okay, let's try this, or here, let's look over here. Yes, at a certain point, you're going to have to discover whether their dominance is something that they're doing just to try and, I guess, in a way, win you. Whether, they're faking it till they make it, hoping for that, or they're finding that they just enjoy the kinky in the bedroom side. They don't want the rest of the dominance, but that's what you're expecting. So, but all of that comes over time. There's no easy way to shortcut that. So, especially in the beginning, even if you're submissive, you're going to kind of have to be the leader of the journey into all things kinktastic. So don't expect someone, even if you want them to be on the dominant side of the slash, don't expect them to go there, understand things, and just like, oh yeah, we're talking about DS and you're submissive and I want to be a dominant, so I'm just going to pick up the ball here and I'm going to lead, because they don't know that. This is all new to them more than likely, or what they've heard. They have some good information, and they also have a lot of the craptastic stereotypes that exist around the lifestyle that you're going to have to kind of unlearn them of and teach them the proper things. So submissives, it's not just sit back and toss a book into a prospective vanilla dominant person's lap and they'll just pick up the ball and run with it. You're going to have to I guess, as the old saying goes, lead the horse to water and then see if they drink or not. And that's the other thing. Don't be disappointed in it. And it can be disappointing that you get somebody that you find amazing. They find you pretty darn cool. And you start exploring the whole kink world, and they come back and perhaps they just doesn't work for them. That is a disappointment. Then you have some decisions to make, which hopefully you have made before you went down this road. Like, as we said in the very beginning, you know whether you can do vanilla or not. And secondly, you may also discover that, let's say you've met this person and you started exploring and you're on the dominant side and they turn out to end up on the dominant side. So obviously it's going to be um, a challenge for you to navigate going forward. Do you consider a poly relationship if you're both dominant, or even, and I didn't talk about this very much, but if you're poly, it's the same thing. You have to decide, whether this person is truly poly, or do they have all those wonderful myths about poly that it's just a sex thing and woohoo, yeah, I'm going to say I'm going to give you poly because that means I'll be out there having sex with all kinds of different people and it'll be okay. And however it works for you, but there is there is no right or wrong way to have these discussions. Well, I guess there are some wrong ways to do it. There's always wrong ways to do things, but it's just so important to be respectful, to be kind, to be gracious, and go slow. Speed, it's so easy to get caught up in things are going great, things are just moving right along. Go slow, go slow, go slow, go slow, and expect a lot of questions. And we always remember one of the most important questions to ask somebody is, what does that mean for you? Because when you're talking about DS, especially if you're talking to somebody who is vanilla, what it means for them can be vastly different. Remember, they could think you're talking Mario Kart and you're talking whips and chains. So just make sure that you know what it means to them. So at this point, I want to wish everyone a fabulous week, and I can't wait to talk to you next week. And no matter where you're listening or the platform you're listening on, don't forget to click that little button that says follow so you never miss an episode. And I look forward to chatting with you next week. And until then, have a wonderful day.